A variety of reasons, in addition to faith, propelled me to become part of the protest movement against the war. I came to the conclusion fairly early on that it was not in our diplomatic interest, it was not in our country's economic interests, it was not even in our interests politically to be involved in what appeared to be a civil war. And I certainly didn't feel, based upon my faith, that I could, in good conscience, go into an organization whose main purpose was killing people. My faith just told me that it was important for me to serve my country, because I did believe in being patriotic, but I wanted to do something in a much more positive way. In 1962, we were living in South Dakota, and the draft was, the military draft was underway. And so I had to make a decision. Actually, before the war started, I was doing 2 years of volunteer service under the auspices of the Church of the Brethren. But it was in conjunction with the selective service system of doing something in the national interest that would satisfy the requirement of 2 years of as an alternative to military service. Persons who entered this program were called conscientious objectors to war. And after that 2-year stint, then I entered Manchester College as a sophomore. I believed that, from a faith perspective, that it was important that we not engage in any war. I had already been doing a lot of reading about the war and the protest movement, which we call the peace movement. The media called it the anti-war movement. I started putting posters around the campus saying there's going to be a demonstration, protest march in Washington, D.C. in the spring of that year. That was the first national protest against the war, and they expected 10,000 people to be there. Actually, it was about 12,000 that showed up. After that, then I was instrumental in helping to organize a third demonstration later that year in Indianapolis. I did not identify with the hippie movement at all. I never had smoked marijuana. I was never a part of that scene. In fact, there were a couple of demonstrations that I went to where I wore a suit and tie, knowing full well that there would be photographs taken of these hippies with the long hair and all that kind of stuff, to give a more positive image of who was a protester. My attitude toward veterans was that it was a shame that they were being drafted to go to Vietnam. It wasn't that I was blaming them, I was blaming the government policy that forced them to go to these conflicts. I just felt that they were being misled. I wasn't criticizing them for their position, because either they were volunteering or they were being drafted, and it was not serving our nation's interest. That was my concern. And I didn't blame them for that, because some of them did make a conscientious decision to go into the military. And I respected that as much as I hoped that people would respect my position. Today, I still am one who lobbies for social justice. I'm still involved in local church. I am part of some political organizations to bring social justice to the nation. My involvement with the protest movements really defined who I have been for the last 50 years.